The question you've been carrying isn't wrong. It's just aimed at the wrong door. There's a specific kind of silence that only people with church hurt truly know. It's not the silence of someone who stopped believing. It's the silence of someone who believed deeply and then watched the place that first taught them about God become the place that left the deepest wound. You still show up sometimes. Maybe you read, maybe you pray technically, but somewhere between the words and where they used to land, there's a gap now, a distance you can feel but can't explain, and the worst part isn't the silence itself. It's the question the silence keeps generating at 2 in the morning when the house is still and everything else has gone quiet. God, where did you go? What if that question, as sincere and desperate as it is built on a false premise? What if he never moved a single inch? What if the distance you're feeling isn't his withdrawal at all, but the aftershock of a wound that actually changed how closeness registers inside you? Stay with me, because what's unfolding here doesn't just explain the silence, it removes the hidden shame you've been quietly carrying about it. Here's why this matters right now. If you don't understand what happened, you'll keep doing what almost every church hurt believer does. You'll try harder, pray louder, walk away from each failed attempt slightly more convinced that God has somehow grown tired of you. And that belief, that quiet, unspoken conviction that you might be too damaged for his love to reach you, that is the most dangerous wound of all. Not because it's loud, because it's invisible, and invisible wounds don't heal, they just deepen. The desert fathers of the 4th century, men who lived in the Egyptian desert and spent their entire lives learning to sense the presence of God, understood something that modern Christianity has almost entirely forgotten. They had a name for a condition of the soul that produced exactly what you've been experiencing, not depression, not backsliding, not lukewarmness. They called it acedia. And they described it very precisely, a state in which the soul's capacity to be moved by what should move it simply stops working. Not because God withdrew, because the instrument that receives his presence got damaged. Let that land somewhere other than your head. You are not dry because you failed. The channel got disrupted. And there's a specific reason it got disrupted in exactly the way it did, one that makes complete sense once you understand how the soul learns to experience God in the first place. Think about what a healthy church community actually does for a person. The worship surrounds you. Scripture gets taught by people you trust. Belonging wraps around you like evidence that you're not alone in the universe. The presence of God for most people doesn't arrive through solitary mystical experience. It arrives through community, through music, through voices and tables and the feeling of being genuinely known. These aren't just religious activities. For most believers, especially those who came to faith in the context of a church, they become the nervous system through which the soul first learns to sense the divine. They're the wiring, the pathway. Now imagine every single one of those channels, the worship, the teaching, the belonging, the trust, becoming the exact source of the deepest wound you've ever carried. What happens next isn't weakness, it's not spiritual failure. It's actually the soul being merciful toward itself. It closes the pathway. Your nervous system, built to protect you from re-entering territory where you were last broken, begins to flag those same channels as danger. The worship song that used to undo you now makes you cross your arms without knowing why. The scripture that once felt like oxygen now lands flat, like words in a foreign language you used to speak. The silence during prayer, which used to feel like intimacy, now feels like proof of something you'd rather not name. And you've been calling that God's silence. But it isn't. What you've been experiencing as spiritual distance is actually your own soul keeping you safe from what hurt you. That's not a poetic way of saying something vague. That's the mechanism. That's the physics of what happened. The problem is that the walls the soul builds don't distinguish between the people who wounded you and the God who didn't. They can't. The wound arrived through the same channels his presence used, so the soul closed both doors at once. You built a wall around a wound, and without realizing it, you locked him outside it. This is what makes church rejection so uniquely devastating compared to almost any other kind of relational wound. Physical rejection injures the body. Relational betrayal injures trust. But church rejection injures the very mechanism through which most people learn to receive love from God. It doesn't just hurt you, it rewires the frequency. And no amount of trying harder will fix a damaged frequency. Here's where it gets harder and more honest. The longer this goes on, the more evidence accumulates. Every prayer that falls flat becomes another data point that he's gone. Every Sunday that leaves you emptier than when you arrived becomes another reason not to return. Every unanswered question adds another layer to a belief that isn't theological. It's something quieter than that. Something that lives in the body, not the mind. Maybe God's love is just for people who haven't been through what I've been through. That's the real wound, not the silence itself. The conclusion you drew in the dark while you were waiting for an answer he was already trying to send through channels you'd closed. And the cruelest part, the church rarely talked about this. You sat in services designed for people who were thriving. You heard messages about pressing in, seeking more, believing harder, and with every instruction to do something spiritually, the gap between where you actually were and where they said you should be got wider and wider. Until you stopped talking about it. Until you started performing a version of okay that you didn't actually feel inside. Until the silence became the loudest thing in your entire life. Here's what Paul knew when he wrote from a prison cell in Philippians 4, not from comfort, not from a season of spiritual clarity, from chains, from waiting, from a community he loved that was fracturing around him. And he writes about a peace that passes understanding. Notice what that phrase actually means. It doesn't arrive through understanding. It doesn't come from finally resolving why God felt so distant. It comes through something, a specific quality of honesty that the ancient practitioners called the examen. 3 questions, not complicated, not requiring theological expertise. The first, when did you last feel genuinely moved? Not recently, go back as far as you need, before the wound, before the church hurt, before the closing began. What were you doing? Where were you? What was present? The second, can you locate the moment the closing started? Not to relive it, not to reopen the wound, but to name it, because you cannot begin to heal what has no name. And naming it without shame is not the same as excusing it. It's the first act of honesty the soul needs to start reopening. The third, and this is the one that changes everything, what would it feel like to bring your actual self into his presence right now? Not the version you think he's waiting for, not the together one, the one who's figured it out, the one who's not angry or confused or numb, the actual one, the wounded one, the one watching this right now. Because what Philippians describes, that peace that surpasses every human ability to manufacture it, it wasn't written for people who had it all resolved. It was written for people in chains who chose to bring their actual situation into relationship with a God who hadn't abandoned them. In everything with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known. In everything, including the silence, including the wound, including the 2 a.m. question that keeps circling back. The silence was never punishment. It was protection, yours, not his. And the way forward isn't to summon more effort or perform more faith or will yourself to feel something your soul is protecting itself from feeling. The way forward begins with one thing, understanding for maybe the first time that the distance was never the final word, that what you interpreted as his withdrawal was your own survival mechanism operating exactly as designed, just a little too well. He never moved. He's been present in the ache that proves you still want him, in the reaching that happens even in the middle of the silence, especially in the middle of the silence. That reaching is the signal. That reaching is the frequency still alive beneath the damage. And the antenna can be bent back. Not through force, not through trying harder, through understanding what happened and through the bravest thing a church-hurt believer can do, bringing the real version of themselves into a presence that never went anywhere. You've been asking God where he went. He's been asking you the same question. And the fact that you're still here, still reaching, still watching, still wondering, means you already know the answer is closer than the silence made it feel.